So I want you to imagine this for a second. You're trying to use a life-saving piece of technology, but you're stressed. You need it to work now, and it just doesn't. Not because it's broken, but because the designers quietly assumed you had certain things that you actually don't. So before doing this PhD thing, I worked for a life-saving technological company that wrote software. My job was to do the software and the architecture at that company. And I learned a very important lesson at that job. And when people talk about software, they think it's mostly code. But a lot of the real work goes into the decisions and planning on how the technology is going to work. How much information do you load when they open the app? How much data is used when they do certain processes on your app? What happens during the experience of the app if the internet connection drops? What do you do when someone needs to retry and refresh? How do you handle that? These decisions, they're invisible when they go right. They seem to become very much apparent when something goes wrong. So in working with these technologies, let me take my glasses off, it's not as bright. So when I worked with these technologies that were used in very serious situations, the kind of serious situations where reliability is a must. The app cannot go down. The service needs to be up and running. And most of the time, it technically worked as it was supposed to. Logs were created where needed, and the system behaved almost exactly as designed. At least the essentials were there. But I started to notice something a little bit unsettling. Remember, this was a startup, so we were building things from the ground up. And our target audience, at least in the beginning, it's now globalized tech, which is pretty cool, were South Africans. And when I started to go through certain things and understand why we had certain bugs and understand why we couldn't help some people, it was because users couldn't use it reliably. And this wasn't because they didn't understand it. It was because we, the developers, had assumed certain things about their life and their interaction with the technology that weren't actually there. It assumed stable internet. It assumed that the person had enough data on their phone. Like, when I say data, I mean like 10 gigabytes or whatever. And we assumed that retrying or refreshing wasn't a big deal. And those assumptions are really easy to make when you are testing on yourselves. Where you're like, I always have data. I have stable internet connection. I have fiber. I have all this kind of stuff. And I learned in many first world countries, you could design around the average user. You would create this profile to say, Bob does this, Bob likes this, Bob exists here. However, in third world countries, and especially in South Africa, it's a little bit different. User in a first world country. This average user, you assume that they have an internet connection. They are someone with a modern smartphone. They have reliable connectivity. It's actually a little bit bright right now. And enough data where a retry is annoying, but not costly. You can debate whether that's a right or wrong assumption, but it's what most companies use to design technology. The thing with South Africa is it doesn't give you that average user shortcut. And let me explain. In South Africa, many different lives are lived by many different people. The wealth disparity, and I've spoken about this before in my South Africa series, is actually insane. Some people have the iPhone 17 Pro with 100 gigabyte internet line, and the speed is insane, and they don't have to worry about certain things. Others are counting megabytes. I can only send 5 WhatsApp messages. And you think that I'm joking when I say that, but it's legitimately the truth. Others know that in a certain area of their house or a certain part of the way when they walk home, they will not have internet connection. It just doesn't exist there. And we all know that that gap, that wealth disparity, did not appear just out of the blue. It is a result of the apartheid system that existed, and there are still many, many wounds from that regime. And that has a knock-on effect on many things, and I'm not going to go into them, but I'm talking about designing technology today. So when you design technology in South Africa, your notion of an average user disappears very quickly. And this average user disappears because these different people will use the same technology. So let's be a little bit more specific. Let's talk about an application. They'll use it in the same way. However, one person might look at the cost of a retry. The thing's taking too long to load. Do I push refresh? How much data is that going to cost me? I can't afford it. The other doesn't even think about it. And if there's a failed attempt, the API crashes or something happens, for one user, that is just a frustration and you need to just click again. For the other, they might be like, I can't do this. It's going to cost me too much in terms of data. Or I literally am walking home and I don't have internet and I cannot click retry. And if that technology is critical and it's necessary for your safety, that difference, it really matters. And this is where it kind of dawned on me that when there's a wealth disparity, the constraints differ. You have to include other people in it. You have to understand your market. You have to understand, what does it mean when someone can't access the technology? How do we do better? How do we make sure that everyone can use this life-saving technology? And that means that you design around these things. You understand that a big data call is not the right way to do it. Therefore, it might take you longer and you need different architecture, but it's a necessity. Just as much as it's a necessity for companies to reduce costs on certain things. Your user base is very important, especially when it's life-saving technology. And one has to understand the people that they are dealing with. And in South Africa, that, as sad as it is, really helped me in my viewpoint of the world and technology, because it means I now understand what a heavy data call is, what costs a little bit more, that might save the company a few whatever monies, will actually cost the users a lot. And that might be a life or death situation that certain companies, and I think more companies these days, should be considering. It's not just about saving the company's costs. It's about understanding the users, their constraints, the world that they live in. Some people have it really hard. I am very privileged. I understand. I am where I've grown up in, it's just I recognize my privilege and I know that I need to do better. And this is one of the ways in my little world where I'm quite strict about. I led a team and I did not let technology go out that could not be used by certain users. We had to design around all use cases to make sure that people got help that they needed. It's very important. Just because they don't have as much money or have as much as you doesn't mean they should be excluded from certain things. And that's kind of the amazing thing about South Africa. And it does arguably make technology harder to build, but it also makes it more honest, more accessible to many people, because we're forced to see that there's no normal or average user here. And that concept, it shouldn't actually exist in the Western world either. And once we start building technology with that type of awareness or that type of thinking, we start to make better decisions around accessibility for everyone. Simple example in the Western world is the use of QR codes. I know it's not extreme and it's not life-saving, but some people don't have smartphones, and they may not be able to, it might not be they can't afford it or whatever. I don't want to generalize, but it might just be that they choose not to use a smartphone. Now they can't do certain things. So, just say, if you're ever questioning to use South African technology, it's actually brilliant stuff. There's some very smart people, and our constraints in this system are quite insane. Why do you think so many software developers are being hired all over the world? It's because of this thinking that we've obtained from understanding our population just a little bit better. Anyway, shout out to you all my tech friends here in South Africa. See you guys tomorrow.
Sister Bettina! All right.
Come here, Dylan.
In the meantime...
Am I by your house?
Oh, shit!
It's your house. Is this your house?
It's happening tonight.
Is this your house?
In the place to be. Come on in.